Thank you a second time. So my talk is going to echo a lot of the ones you've heard or will hear today, but I'd like to transport you to another part of the world. So for the past 7 years, I've been studying secret society. This is the shy and elusive Asian elephant. It's the largest land mammal in Asia, but also one that's very endangered. I'd like to tell you about this mysterious animal and the challenges for wildlife in adjusting to human-dominated landscapes. But first, there seems to be a common misconception that Asian elephants are somehow domesticated. I've even met people who seem surprised to hear that there is such a thing as a wild Asian elephant. I wonder whether maybe it's because in the West, people are used to seeing elephants as these captive performers of tricks for entertainment. Or maybe it's because Asian elephants have actually had an association with people for 5,000 years. They've been as important in the East as horses have been in the West. Civilizations and empires have risen and fallen on the backs of elephants. But unlike horses, elephants were never domesticated in the sense that they were never bred for generations to serve human needs. In fact, in many parts of the world, Asian elephants are so shy and wary of humans that they come out only at night, making them very difficult to observe. And even in broad daylight, they're actually quite good at hiding. Can you figure out how many are in this photograph? In fact, there are 7 in just this photograph. So before I tell you about Asian elephants, let me show you that elephants used to come in a bizarre array of shapes and sizes. And they used to be found throughout all the continents, many of them anyway. But today they're just found on Asia and Africa. And a lot of what we know about elephants is based on some very detailed long-term studies of the African savanna elephant. What we know from this species is that females and calves form these very tightly knit family groups that associate with other families and form a highly structured society that is matriarchically based. The adult males don't form such tight-knit groups, but they have relationships of their own. And together, this seems to be one of the most complex in the societies in the animal kingdom. Until recently, people pretty much assumed that Asian elephants behave the same way. But if you look at the evolutionary history, Asian and African elephants, along with the now extinct woolly mammoths, diverged about 6 million years ago. That's a pretty long span of time, considering that's about the same span of time that separates us and chimpanzees. In fact, the little research that had been done on Asian elephants seemed to suggest that they preferred to live in these small, loosely connected groups. So I was interested in finding out the truth. So now let me take you halfway around the world to this little national park called Udawalawe in southern Sri Lanka. I work in Sri Lanka because it seems that Sri Lanka has quite a few elephants, and also because I happen to be from Sri Lanka. Now, I hadn't originally intended to start my own field site, but I had an experience that put me on that path. So it was my first year of graduate school, and I knew I wanted to work on elephants, but I wasn't sure exactly what I was going to do or where I was going to work. And on my very second day in Udawalawe, I met Raja. Raja means king in Sinhalese, and he is just one of 4 adult males with tusks in the park. So in Asian elephants, the females don't have tusks. And in Sri Lanka, a lot of the males don't either. So this was quite a rare sight. And with his one broken tusk, he reminded me immediately of Ganesh. In the Hindu tradition, Ganesh is known as a remover of obstacles. Now, even though I'm a Muslim and also a scientist who doesn't buy into the notion of a personified deity, this mental association was very powerful. So I decided to stay in Udawalawe, and I started by learning to try to identify individual elephants by their most distinctive feature, which is their ears. We started with the females and then moved on to the males and the calves. And before we knew it, we found that there were over 800 animals using this one tiny little park, which is about double the number that anyone had previously expected. By watching them for long periods of time, we got quite an intimate understanding of their social relationships. We found, for example, that some social groups, like the Ks here, which are Kamala, Kanti, and a number of other adult females and their calves, are very tightly knit. They went practically everywhere together, and they formed these social networks that are very tightly connected. And occasionally they would associate with others and form larger groups. But other individuals seem to change their companions almost every day. Some social units knit up with others to form larger interconnected social networks, whereas others, like Natalie and Naina down at the bottom here, tended to be more isolated. If you look over time, you see that these networks actually change quite a bit. Individuals switch around, and in fact, it's a very dynamic and fluid society. Over the years, we saw a lot of births, and we also saw several deaths. And we saw interesting and sometimes moving behavior, like the fact that they show concern over dead or dying individuals, even if they don't know them. So now I'd like to bring you back to Raja. We saw Raja every year until about 2009, and Raja was most definitely an animal of flesh and blood because he had a problem. He was addicted to human crops, to food crops, and every year he showed up with gunshot wounds. In 2009, he showed up with a particularly bad injury on his trunk. Now, the trunk is an elephant's most important appendage, and we never saw Raja again. Which brings me to the human side of the story. You see that people estimate that there are less than 100,000 Asian elephants in the world. That means that there are more people in just Fort Collins than there are Asian elephants in the world. And there are more people in just a few villages surrounding Udabawe National Park than there are elephants in all of Sri Lanka. Even though they look like they might be existing quite happily side by side here in this picture, they're in fact, in reality, separated by just a thin thread of electricity that runs down the length of the fence. As our population grows, we are quite literally running out of space for wildlife, and this gives rise to conflict. A lot of the conflict is over agriculture, because a lot of the people there are farmers. And things like rice and banana are typical crops. This is a fairly typical scene. Although it looks idyllic, the stage is set for conflict. And the reason is because food crops are also really attractive to wildlife, and often these things exist side by side, providing obvious temptation. People usually have to live nearby or have shelters nearby to defend their crops, and this raises the chances that one or other gets hurt. Every year, people kill elephants and elephants kill people. What we need instead is a buffer, a barrier, with trees to provide a shield and habitat for other wildlife, and an understory that also provides a barrier and habitat. All of this could be planted with non-subsistence, commercially valuable crops. Although it's simple, it seems like a simple idea. In practice, it's difficult to implement. And the reason is this. This is a typical farmer. Put yourself in his shoes. He works really hard to support his family on very tight margins. And he plants only what he knows to plant, only grows what he knows to grow. Often they get in debt. Sri Lanka has one of the highest rates of suicide in all of Asia. And the number one reason and the number one method is pesticide poisoning. So these issues are connected. We need to work with people like this to find solutions that work for them rather than simply imposing our view on what they should do. As we try to figure out how to work with the grown-ups, we're also working with the kids. These kids, some of them live directly across from the park. They can literally see elephants from their front doors, but some of them have never even been inside the park. By taking them there and teaching them a bit about ecology and biology, we hope to increase their appreciation and awareness of the amazing wildlife and wilderness that's literally on their doorsteps. Now, let me zoom out. As you may have heard, our population hit 7 billion last year and still growing. This puts an incredible amount of pressure on every other species on Earth. And the bottom line is we have to strike this delicate balance. Large, long-ranging animals like elephants force us to face the question, is there space for all of us? And this is the challenge of our time. Elsewhere in Southeast Asia, elephants and lots of other species are losing habitat wholesale to plantations like these, which are oil palms. An article in the journal Nature last year pointed out that 80% of the deforestation is due to conversion into agriculture. 30% of our greenhouse gas emissions are due to agriculture. Today, practically all of the land available for cultivation is already under cultivation. The areas that are left are either deserts or areas that are really so full of biodiversity that we shouldn't be converting them anymore. And it's not just for food. It's for things like animal feed and biofuels. And just look at this headline. It's tragic beyond words that something as mundane as toilet paper is taking out ecosystems. Now I warn you that the next slide is going to be graphic, so any parents in the audience may want to have our younger members of the audience look away. So, somewhere in Africa, at this very moment, elephants are being killed for their tusks. This is not for food, it's not for self-defense, it's in the name of trinkets and ornaments. And this is all the more appalling and tragic because this is history repeating. All of this happened 30 years ago. The first time it was driven by demand from the West. This time it's being driven by demand from the East. The first time they stopped it because massive publicity campaigns made the demand collapse. And it won't stop this time either until the elephants are all gone or the demand disappears. This message is for everybody, but in particular, Asians, Asian Americans. We need to talk to our friends and family. We need to communicate that these are not status symbols to be proud of. People have looked up at the stars for a long time and asked, are we alone? And there are two answers to this question. The first is, yes, as far as we know, this precious planet is the only one that has life. But the second is no, because intelligent life is all around us. These are our brothers and sisters. We're related in every sense of the word. We're companions in the evolutionary journey. There's so many non-human societies, and we're just starting to understand their beautiful complexity, but they're unraveling before our eyes. And it's not just the cute, charismatic animals we should care about either. Sure, elephants are cute and cognizant, but that's not why we should care about them or anything else. These are seedlings sprouting out of elephantdom. You see, elephants are creators and destroyers of habitat for other species. They're a central component in a dynamic whole. And this whole is like a machine in which we ourselves are embedded. It's not about saving the planet. New things will always replace what's lost. But the question is, will we survive? All of our most brilliant engineers can't replace with technology the interactions that maintain life on Earth as we know it. Now, all of this may seem a bit overwhelming, so I'd like to share with you some principles I came up with for myself. First, think clearly, learn about your world, inform yourself, understand, and most importantly, learn to think for yourself. And then, feel deeply. Let yourself be moved by the things you learn. Find that one little corner of the universe over which you can have an impact, and then act on it. Don't waste any time, because you don't have any time to waste. But remember not to leave any one thing out either, because to rush into action without understanding or empathy is sure to do more harm than good. Now, in case you feel far removed from all the things that I'm talking about, remember that you are having an impact just by being alive. Everything you buy, everything you consume comes from somewhere, and that today that somewhere may be halfway around the world. You, the consumer, you are powerful. Exercise your power. But if you think that keeping track of every little purchase is absurd, I agree with you. That's where regulation comes in. And that's not the only thing that this body is supposed to do. They fund science and research, and we need to let them know that that's important. A lot of my work, guess who funded it? It was taxpayers like you. And programs like the Multinational Species Conservation fund international research and conservation on all kinds of different species, not just in the US. We need to let our legislators know that programs like that are important to us. You, the citizen, you're powerful. Exercise your power. And finally, think carefully about the way that you spend the waking moments of your life. We don't all have to do the same thing, but seek your passion as though your life depends on it, because it does. You, the individual, you, the person, you're powerful. Exercise your power. These are the next generation. Little Fang's in front here. We've known him since he was about 3. We don't know what happened to Raja, but he certainly left descendants, and Little Fang's is probably one of them. They're waiting their turn to take over the landscape, just as your children will inherit what you leave behind. But also remember that it's not just about future generations, because if you're under the age of 60, guess what? You've got a front row seat to whatever's coming next. And the challenge is going to be greater the younger you are. I don't have a single solution, because there isn't just one. It comes down to all of us to figure out how to live together on this little blue planet we call home. Thank you.